Good morning, everyone. These lights are really bright. I'm trying to dodge them, but welcome to this session. My name is Emily Hough, and I'm Editor-in-Chief of the Crisis Response Journal. There's copies dotted around. I'm really pleased to be here today to chair this session on natural hazards, challenges, technologies, and response. And the reason I'm so pleased is because this is an area that, as a journal, over the last 20 months, we feel has been very acute, because just because the world has been focused on a horrific pandemic with an incredibly high death toll, that doesn't mean that Mother Nature has been very generous or kind and said, oh, we'll leave you to it for a bit. We've had wildfires, we've had earthquakes, we've had terrible floods and volcanic eruptions, just to name a few. And this session is perfectly composed, in my opinion. We've got two reports from the front lines which are bookended between technology innovations. So we're going to be looking at flooding in Genoa and an earthquake in Turkey, and then some of the technology that helps with warnings and intelligence. And why is this so important? Because technology and data can help save lives, minimize stress on PSAPs and emergency responders. Information is intelligence. Ask any commander of a crisis, in those first few moments in decision-making and sense-making, you need information, you need data, you're trying to make sense of what's happening. The more advanced the data and the intelligence, the greater the warning, the more informed the command can be, and the quicker and more effective the response will be. Now, you're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to our wonderful speakers. The format's going to be each speaker will make their presentation. I'll throw the floor open to a question or two, but we will also have a discussion at the end. So welcome to our speakers. We have Francisco from Esri, Federico from Genoa, who will be talking about flooding, Dr. Turhan, who will be talking about urban response in earthquakes in Turkey. And then we have Ed from Google, who will be talking about some of the technology that they've been working on. So, Francisco, if you'd like to take the stand.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, a small problem with this. Between the glasses and the earphones and the mask. Thank you so much. So, Esri. Esri is a company that has been working on the public safety side for quite a long time, almost from its inception, some 50-odd years ago. I'll be talking a little bit about our experience working on gathering and supporting the use of sensor data, Internet of Things, to improve agency response to disasters. My presentation will be slightly different in the sense that of the traditional ones that we probably hear from Esri, because we've been working quite hard, not only on the public safety side, but on the defense side too. And to be truthful, what we learn on the defense, we apply on the public safety and vice versa. And that goes to commercial too. So that is a continuum of information that we need to support to get the best answers possible to the operators. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So what's GIS? Most people understand GIS, the guys from the maps, the guys that provide you a map. In reality, what we are talking about is a system that provides a framework and a process to guarantee that all the, since the data collection to the action delivered to the field, we need to have a continuum. And that continuum re-enable themselves in the sense that what we gather to during a specific action will encompass new measurements and new approaches to the problems. So that's one of the areas where we've been working quite clearly. And if you look at a more real thing, what we are discussing is the data that is basic from already known data on the maps that you use every day, to data that is collected in the field that supports the passage of message between the field and the command center, and then again that guarantees vision unified of the operation field that allows commanders to better act. So it be it in the police force, emergency management, firefighters, or in the call center. Doesn't matter. Everyone gains for having better information of what's happening so they can act properly under their own rules. Context. So all of that information is able to provide a context of what's happening. You see a vision of a 3D city that is helpful in realizing what we are facing. Most of your firefighters, of your emergency management persons, your policemen know the region, know the city. But if it's a major event, a major natural disaster, the event is too large, you probably need to keep calling people from the outside. So you need to provide information to the people from the outside of what's the reality. And that cannot count on solely the knowledge of the persons that are already in the field and know what's happening and where they are. Then, passing to insight to foresight, basically looking at what happened, what we gather of information, analyzing that information to provide some visualization of what's really happening, and then goes down to understanding the conditions of what's happening around it. So if you're talking about an incident in a small factory, but if the small factory is near a major pump station, those things are relevant. So you need to guarantee that you are able to understand that and act upon properly to avoid major disasters. Then understanding the situation, take decisions, and take action. So basically, this cycle, and it is a cycle, reenacts himself over and over again in smaller circles, because you receive data very rapidly from a caller in the center, and then you start to receive calls from a lot of people on the same incident. So you need to push that information back to the system so you can rearrange your view of the problem. So we work with what we call the science of where. Implies more than the map, implies all the information that is supported in a map. And if you look at carefully, there is no activity we do that doesn't have a position in space and time. So anything we do, anything that happens, has a position in space and time. And be careful. We are moving from a 3D space to a 4D space. Okay? And the main objective is going from integrating people, process, things, and data about them. So creating what we call a system of records, so all the information that we can gather, a system of engagement, and a system of insights. So if you look at the literature from IBM, you'll find those three systems as major systems that we need to understand. Where the data is and the type of data we have and the quality of that data to support our mission. Then the ability with the system of insights of analyzing that data and providing intelligence. And finally, that intelligence is provided to the field so they can act upon what the information was given to them. Okay? So, system of record is basically a system that integrates all the data, period. So, traditional, if you go to a PSAP, you'll see the information from the calls. Okay? Do you need more information on the PSAP? Probably yes. On the NG112, you probably need maps. You probably need information from the entities that are in the field or that you are dislocating, dispatching for the field. So there is quite a lot of information that goes outside and beyond the traditional information that the PSAP received on a call. And in the past, the call was from a fixed phone, so we had a location of the fixed phone. Nowadays, we're talking about essentially mobile phones. So you need to guarantee that you are able to evaluate the positioning of that wireless device somewhere in time and space, so you can act upon. And you may be able to get that information ahead of the person saying to you, I'm in street A, number 3. Okay? So all of that information needs to be passed along to the system. And that implies almost anything. If you look in a city like London, where there are about 900 cameras operational supporting the entities on the public safety and not only, traffic control, those cameras can be seen, and the information from the cameras can help understand what could be a major disaster caused by an agglomeration of people, an agglomeration of cars, whatever. So that is a level of information that, if it's passed to the PSAP, for instance, will allow a controller in the PSAP starting to see something evolving and developing and trying to prepare the people in the PSAP to, we are going to start to receive calls from that specific place because this is happening. Okay? So you guys have mostly televisions with information passing around on the news. This is a step further on a process that you already use. So nothing new onto it. Unstructured data, tabular data, LiDAR pound coins. So all of this is information that is going to pass through the PSAP or in support of the PSAP. Some today already. Some of those will happen in 10 years. But somewhere in time, the PSAP is the main receiver of information that supports the understanding of incidents, major disasters and the reaction, smaller disasters and the reaction, and the behavior of whomever is in the field. So the PSAP is basically now call taking and dispatch, but is one of the areas that has the most rich level of information to support then the services, firefighters, police, emergency management, whatever, to deconflict and better locate their resources to support what's a trend in the city, in the village, in the county, in whatever place you think about. Okay? So people tend not to understand that clearly, but for instance, nowadays, if you're looking at a major incident, let's say earthquake with houses being destroyed, landslides, etc., the first thing you can get is imagery from GRC in Europe, satellite imagery. Okay, and that gives you the first impression for the first responders, what's happening in the field. What is the, what could be the understanding of what's happening there before even sending anyone there. Okay, so if the call center has that information, they can properly calculate who should be the first responders in that situation. Because you probably cannot count all the people that is already there, the firefighters, etc., because they are worried with their families. So they are trying to help first their families, then acting to the people in the situation. So you probably need to guarantee that you push people from the outside into the space. And the people from the outside don't know the space. So they need information from the space. Okay, so just to give you that idea that all of this all of these levels of information are essential. Real time, what we call information from information from the Internet of Things, again, comes to sensors. The cameras we just discussed, but sensors on temperature, sensors on gas, levels of gas in a specific area. We're seeing more and more cities having those levels of information available for the city management. So if we receive the alarms in the PSAP of some incident within one of the systems of the municipality, we can start to think and plan what needs to be delivered to that city or to that space where the levels of pollution from a specific chemical is increasing. And we can act upon the information sometimes before the municipality calls you saying, we have a problem. Okay, so this understanding implies that what we call the operational cycle is getting faster, and the final answer to whatever problem should be within less time than the previous one, if we learn from. Okay, so the objective is learning from. Systems of insight and engagement. So this is our technology in the end of the day. You need to be able to grab the information you receive and transform that information into information that can be analyzed and provide dashboards that allows the PSAP to understand the situation they have in the area they are covering, to information that needs to be passed to people in the field, and finally, information that can be used to provide with the data science. AI is the word of the moment for doing some of that, to analyze, reanalyze the information and grab the trends of what's happening. Okay? So system insight and engagement is basically gathering the information, analyzing the information, and passing the information to the field, basically. And to be truthful, this represents a bit where we are. A lot of us came from the analog world. We had radios, we had paper maps, we had whatever. A lot of people is evolving to a complete digital environment. Okay? Defense forces, police are looking and working, and your CAD systems are digital in format nowadays. So we're talking about moving to the digital world completely. Then what we are discussing in here is the possibility to go to interactive. So you gather the information, you analyze the information, you get answers, and you act upon those answers, even before anyone calls. Be prepared for the first call to act upon. So the system may need to be and move to a more interactive approach, where you not only dispatch information, but you are able to receive additional information to dispatch other means if necessary. So there is that complete, consequent flow of information and operations. And finally, we'll get there, immersive. If you look at some of the systems that you use today, they tend to be immersive in concept. If you look at gaming, you are looking at immersive solutions where you have your game, you have your oculi that will allow you to view things and being inside the situation. So time comes where that will be happening to a CAD operator, where they will be seeing the operation, what's happening in the field, what he needs to answer, and so on and so forth. So this is what I call the evolution of understanding.
and everyone talks about this, digital twins. Okay? This is just to give you an idea that digital twins are nothing more than a virtual representation of the real world. Could be just a map, or could be a 3D scene, or whatever that's necessary to understand where you are and how to act upon. So a digital twin could be something very complex, but could be just only the 3D models of the city, or anything that is necessary for your specific work, and can be evolving through time. Okay? Building and understanding terrain, so levels of information that can go from anything on a map, on imagery, to a building directly. Having the interiors of the building, allowing the navigation throughout the building. So that's real things now. And finally, the last slide to give you an idea of what we understand as geospatial enabling immersive management. We're talking about the data. We're talking about creating foundation information. We're talking about operations situation awareness, analysis, planning, and passing information to the public in general. We're talking about pushing information to the remote locations from fixed headquarters, mobile command posts, and deployed information. And all of these, sorry, this, not, so all of these will gather new information that will be passed to the start of this area and start the process of gathering the overall thing. And there is an important group that's geospatial infrastructure that's here in the space that collects all of that information with the level of quality of that information, so that that can be used by the PSAP to analyze things that are useful in the future by understanding the past, that they need to pass to the police, they need to pass to the firefighters, they need to pass to the municipalities, they need to pass to whomever has the ability to analyze, to help all of us live in a more secure environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francisco. We have time for one quick question if anyone in the audience has got anything. There will be time for questions afterwards as well. Has anyone got any burning issues they'd like to ask? No, so thank you very much. We'll pick that up later. So we'd now like to introduce Federico Brizio, and he's going to be talking to us about the flooding and the whole management of recent flooding in Genoa, along with some of the issues and problems that were encountered. Thank you very much. Thank you.
My name is Federico Brizio. I'm from Italy, and I am a firefighter professional. So I'm a control room coordinator at the Genoa Fire Brigade. You know, Genoa is the most important town of the region of Liguria. Liguria is a beautiful region, a touristic region. We have sea, mountain, forest, coastal landscape, and historic center everywhere. We have also a lot of characteristical town in our back country, with just one road to reach them and the same road to escape. Of course, we have also industries, ports, airport, motorways. So our days in a control room usually are really very, very busy. But today our focus is about flash floods. You know, Liguria is a narrow stripe of land between sea and mountain. So the clouds full of water come from the sea, hit the mountains, and discharge on our heads a huge quantity of water. Our land is vertical, is really steep, so the water is immediately like a river, a high-speed river, and our control room is immediately overwhelmed by hundreds of calls. The worst is when we have also the sea storm. Usually we have a sea storm during rains. So the sea is like a wall and the rivers can't flow out. The typical operation carried out by firefighters are these: rescue, water damages, cladding problems, unsafe structures. You remember our fallen bridge 2 years ago. Unsafe structures, generic problems, and assessment. Our organization is based on ICS, Incident Command System. We have our Fire Brigade commander and 4 different sectors: operation sector, planning, logistic, and administration. The operation is managed by a liaison officer, and our control room usually is one only control room, now has split into different control rooms, where we have the call taker room and the call dispatcher room. Then the planning with officer who manage the map makers, the sector expert like scuba diving, mountain rescue, CBRN, and so on, and the sector about the weather forecast analysis. Then the logistic to offer support to the incoming teams who reach us to help us. Then the team support for food and drink and rest, and the vehicle support to fix their vehicles. In the end, the administration with personnel and the mission office. What are the problems in our control room, especially high flow of emergency calls, of course. For example, in 2008, 2,000 incoming calls in 24 hours. High flow of radio communication and the barrier effect. The barrier effect is, for example, obtain and send reinforcement teams. They can't reach us because the roads flooded, because of landslides, and because, and we are the second point, people stop our teams to ask for help, especially also for minor problems, so for problems not immediately to solve. And then the fake news generating fake calls. Someone call our emergency line and say, okay, in the town near mine, they have a problem. But you are on site? No. You have news from your relatives? Absolutely not. So what? I read on Facebook. I read on Instagram. I read on WhatsApp. This is a problem because we have not eyes and ears on site to tell us exactly what to do. The solution for high flow, both for radio channel, both for high flow of communication. We split our control room in 2 different control rooms, call taker and call dispatcher. In call taker room, we have 4 call taker who receive the calls and put data inside our management system. Is SO 115. 115 is the old number of emergency for fire department. In the other room, we have the dispatcher, expert dispatcher, people with a high level of skills. The call dispatcher 1 manage the team in the field and the advanced command vehicle or advanced command post. The call dispatcher 2 is the help for call dispatcher 1, mainly this, but also like a liaison officer with our regional fire direction for RDC, reception and departure center, the point where incoming teams from other regions come to help us, but also with civil protection, because we have an army of volunteers. They could help us a lot, especially for not particularly dangerous situation. The call dispatcher 3 is for ordinary emergency, because of course the ordinary emergency go ahead, and the usual operation we carry out in the normal days. Fire in apartment, car fire, people fall down in pavement, unable to reach the door, and assistance to ambulance service, and so on. And the senior operator, the 4 call dispatcher, is for backup and delayed calls. It means to review continuously the call in waiting area. Call people to ensure they are safe, to offer our assistance, to send them some instruction, to be really close to them. This is really very appreciated. And also to check the delayed calls from the PSAP 112, that in this situation could put some calls in a tank, in a delayed tank, where, because we know already the situation, we are already on site. but this is a good movement for us because less call to overwhelm us, but at the same time we must check to be sure they have not to do some mistake. Of course, both the call taker are managed by a liaison officer. Solution for barrier effect, the color alert system to obtain and send reinforcement teams, because we have a civil protection alert. When we have orange or red alert, we could deploy hours before the event our teams and send them directly on site, because we know perfectly the site of our next floods, because are always the same sites. For minor problem, assessment team, 2 people, team of 2 persons on site to speak with the people, to understand their needs, to be close to them. And this is very important from the human side, and also, of course, for the technical side. And the customer care, that is very, very important. For the fake calls, the crossing check and the teamwork with other organizations, other control room, crossing check with ambulance service control room, police department, civil protection control room. So this is Chief Alan Brunasini. It was one of the most important chiefs in USA Arizona Fire Department, and respect, courtesy, caring, and compassion. This is the customer care. This is very important. He said that people will remember you more for your humanity than that for your technical skills, and more for your behavior, because we were nice than we are skilled. So this is for us really, really important to create a link with our callers, to be so close to them. Okay, good. The challenges for the future, the awareness of the importance of the role of control room and the control room operator. The planning before the war, before the event, absolutely planning and build a chain of command, a coordination protocol with other resources, especially civil protection. And of course the training of our operators, but also of the operators of 112 control room. In Liguria, there is a good experience. We are very, very close, and we exchange very often our expert to build together the best solution possible for our emergency. Our goal is get out from the comfort zone and walk through the fear zone and through the learning zone to reach the growth zone. This is our target at the moment. Because we are the people who have the chance to improve the worst day in someone's life. Let's not waste it. Thank you to Steve Pike for this beautiful statement. Thanks to all of you for your kind listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. I think there's some common themes that are already emerging throughout the conference, whatever the incident, whether it's COVID, whether it's a natural hazard, or even a terrorist attack. It's that scalability of control room operations. And I really appreciate you reminding us of the humanity and being able to improve someone's worst day of their life. And it's absolutely brilliant to see the legendary Alan Brunacini quoted. Only he was man. Are there any immediate questions for Federico, or shall we? We'll move on and we'll take it. Thank you again.
Thank you.
So now we are moving on to Dr. Turhan, who is going to be telling us a little bit more about emergency operations in urban events, such as in urban areas involving with earthquakes in Turkey. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Turhan Sofuoglu. I worked as an ambulance physician and manager, national and regional levels. Now I'm head of Emergency Ambulance Physician Association. Our organization was founded in 2004 in Izmir. We organized many congress and symposiums and trainings, next generation technologies, about next generation technologies, and we organized international ambulance rallies, ambulance team competition. As an NGO, we conduct research in emergency and disaster medical response field. We have been participating in EU projects since 2008, and currently 4 projects are ongoing under security call. Three EU projects related to resilience, assistance, team aware, I-Procure security PSAP. The common point of all 3 projects is to increase the situational awareness of the first responder for the disasters and to create solutions that will enable them to work more safely with next generation innovative technologies. My city is Izmir, is 3rd largest city of Turkey. 4,500,000 people live in Izmir, an important commercial port in the Mediterranean region, and economy, history, and social, cultural, and touristic cities. Izmir has experienced disasters throughout history. After the 1999 Marmara earthquake, a very big disaster, the ground of the Izmir city was examined in the context of the Radius project. The durability of the buildings has been evaluated as well. Then, an earthquake scenario prepared in the computer environment, the amount of damage to the buildings on this ground was calculated. Ultimately, Bayraklı district determined it as the most dangerous area, the same area for the latest earthquake. Izmir Bayraklı district is population 310 people. October 30, 2020, at 14.551, magnitude 6.9, earthquake's epicenter of the islands of Samos, Greek. A strong shake was felt in the city center of Izmir. In the city where I live, we experienced an earthquake along with pandemic last year. This was extremely demoralizing and devastating this area, affected area, Bayraklı district. Communication and transportation, scene management and coordination, and many important in this disaster. This area was in the city center. In the city where I live, we experienced an earthquake along with the pandemic last year. As predicted scientifically in Radius project. affected areas in the disaster. Collapsed and damaged buildings were in the same area, but something happened that was blocking the response teams. The earthquake was in the daytime and traffic jam. The response team, ambulances, firefighters, and search and rescue had difficulty reaching this area. Everyone was on the streets. There were panic and chaos because in the daytime and many traffic. Same time, a tsunami occurred in the coastal part of Izmir, very close to the epicenter. After the tsunami, one elder woman drowned, and there was property damage. Uh, 112 call center. In Turkey, as in many European countries, the police, fire brigade, rescue and medical teams are called from the 112 number in case of emergency. Model 3 PSAP under 112 single number and located in the same building in Izmir. In this disaster, the 112 emergency call center support trapped victims who called under the debris. The localization information of the victims provided by the 112. Rescue teams reached the trapped casualties more quickly and saved them alive. The health director teams established a mobile clinic and management center in the region. Many ambulances and medical rescue teams from the other district came to region. National Medical Rescue Team, known as UMKE in Turkey, volunteer health personnel, physician, paramedic, EMTs, and nurses, some ambulance, some hospitals. International certificated by WHO, medical support to search and rescue teams in all kinds of disasters. Over 5,000 UMKE personnel in Turkey. Search and rescue efforts in the collapsed buildings were recorded with drones for 24 hours. The places were alive and dead victims were removed from the wreckage areas were identified. Chain of survival. The chain of survival had been established. All calls to 112 phones were evaluated. Emergency calls, especially regarding collapsed and damaged buildings, are forwarded to rescue teams. Drones, search and rescue dogs, audio and video discovery technologies were used. Risk for rescue and medical teams, there were too many rescue teams, other cities, and come here. They came from different cities. They worked together closely for a long time, 1 week. Rest periods were short, race against time. Some trapped victims in the collapsed buildings were COVID-19 positive. Hours after collapse, buildings, live rescues began, a good coordination war coordination was established between 112 Emergency Call Center, medical and rescue teams. As a result, living people began to be rescued from collapsed buildings. Race against time and the return to life. Search and rescue and medical teams worked for days to find and rescue the trapped victims in collapsed buildings. 107 people were rescued alive, 58, 65, and 91 hours. Some children were rescued. 135 injured went to hospitals. Many casualties and outpatient. Many traumatic cases came to emergency department with ambulances. Same time in the hospital, COVID-19, many COVID-19 patients. A hospital damaged because of the earthquake. All patients and staff were evacuated. Temporary tents, and thousands of people were suddenly homeless or could not enter their camps, their homes. Temporary tents were quickly set up in the park areas. Turkish Red Crescent, municipalities, and NGOs organized aid for those who lost their homes. All kinds of needs were considered in tent areas. Social distance and risks were followed by drones day and night. But it was very difficult to control everything. Risk for affected people, decreased body resistance, increased contagion, difficult of patient follow-ups with COVID, mask, distance, and hygiene challenge. Before earthquake, COVID-19 data. After earthquake, impact areas before and after earthquake in the region. The more COVID-19 patients. Consequences of the earthquake, 118 dead, 1 person drowning, tsunami, 1,035 injured, 19 buildings completely destroyed, 506 buildings heavily damaged, 511 buildings moderately damaged after destroyed, 5,119 buildings slightly damaged. After earthquake, Izmir earthquake mutual mind meeting organized by Izmir Metropolitan Municipality. All public institutions, universities, and NGOs participated in the workshop, and a final report has been prepared together. Now is working in here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very sobering reminder of just what can happen even in the middle of a pandemic. And I know that Turkey has an ongoing program and has done so much work in evaluating and assessing its infrastructure, yet it's still very sobering to see the damage that can be done. I found it fascinating to note the use of drones in the chain of survival. There's an evolution that has been a long time coming and very helpful. Some of the challenges that were presented, and of course, at some point, maybe later in the questions, we can talk about the too many rescue teams and the teams from the liaison and coordination between different teams. But I think the main thing that I'll take away from this is just how difficult it must have been for the people who had been made homeless, and the social distancing measures and the hygiene challenges must have been an absolutely horrendous situation to confront. So thank you very much. We will take questions at the end now because we need to get back on time for, unless there's any burning questions from the audience? No? Thank you very much. And could I invite Ed now to take the stand, and you're going to be talking about some of the evolutions from Google in this field. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here once again. As you know, Google's business is information. We are not first responders. We're not involved directly in crisis response ourselves, and we send our thanks and our respect to those people that are. But we think we have a useful role to play in providing information in times of crisis. And I want to concentrate on some of the very practical things that we're doing to provide information to people in need, and particularly in need of information during crisis, but also to look at some of the research topics that we're also investigating at the same time. This graph represents really our business. Here are people searching for the term earthquake following an earthquake. And it's not surprising that people go to the internet, they come to Google, and we see spikes in searches for information like this. We all know that trying to find valid, correct, actionable information is increasingly challenging online. It seems every time there is a flood in North America, particularly in cities in North America that have subway systems, those subway systems become infected by sharks. I'm not quite sure how this can happen, but nevertheless, every time there is a flood in a subway system somewhere in the United States, they get sharks. Our job is to try and prevent too much of that information going into the hands of citizens and provide the relevant information. At Google, we have a principle that we follow whenever we're designing products or services, and that is to really focus on the user, to identify the user requirements for any particular task. And the predominant user community that we're most interested in providing information to are citizens. Of course, citizens are the big community, but they're not the only people involved in a crisis. And we also have to be wary and provide information and gather information from our local authorities, from first responders themselves. But our focus is on providing information to the citizen, getting information from local authorities, from first responders, and working to some extent in the other direction, but the focus is on civilians. And to do that, we have a number of different methods of providing information to those citizens. The first is something I want to cover called SOS Alerts. We'll then talk about a task or a service called Public Alerts. Both of these are not replacements for public warning systems or cell-based warning systems that are emerging, particularly in Europe over the last couple of years, but are additional sources of information. Then to look at some of those research topics I was mentioning, and finally some of the philanthropy we're doing to provide funding and, again, related to that research, working with partnerships to try and provide more information. So let's look at those SOS alerts first of all. SOS alerts are basically trying to solve that problem that should there be a crisis, an earthquake, a flood, a terrorist event, both natural disasters and man-made disasters, people will go to the internet to try and find relevant information. And what we use SOS alerts for is to try to make sure that we provide people with accurate, concise, relevant information should they ask. And this is what happens. So if you're in an area that is affected by a particular crisis of whatever nature, two things might happen. You will search for that particular event, so perhaps an earthquake or a flood. We will then provide you with the relevant information that we gather from reliable sources. Reliable sources are public agencies, reliable media outlets, to some extent social media. We will look at social media and we will try to gather as much of that information as possible and present it in a concise way when you search for that information. This is done using a combination of algorithms, but with a huge amount of human interaction. So there's a human editorial process that happens. A team is formed around any particular crisis in real time because we have people clearly around the planet working 24 hours a day. They look at the information that is coming in, they contextualize that, they run through a process of scoring the impact of that crisis, and if it's at above a particular impact, you'll see a crisis response, an SOS message appear. Now, that SOS message will appear if you search for a particular term, fire, earthquake, flood, in the area that's being affected. That's the primary way that people will see that message. However, if you have location services switched on your mobile device, and you're within the area that's being impacted by that event, we'll also push proactively a message to your device so that you will immediately see information about that particular alert in the area that's being impacted. And this can be down to a relatively small area. We can do this for a neighborhood within a city and scale all the way out to a continental level. So it's an immediate response. We aim to have the alert up in less than an hour. It will appear in news, on maps as emergency information. As I said, it comes from only authoritative sources that we can vet and understand, and has that huge amount of human impact in an editorial process to make sure that we are only providing valid and useful information. Now, we've been doing this for a number of years, and I just want to cover some of the things that are new. What we are doing in terms of improving the quality of SOS alerts for particular types of crisis is that we are trying to now map more accurately or use hurricane cones, so for those areas that are likely to be impacted by hurricanes. In the areas impacted by hurricanes or tropical storms, a lot of the interest is in, okay, is my area going to be impacted by the storm within the next 24, 36 hours? So we put a lot of effort into making sure that we do that. You may remember the previous president in the United States had some expertise in modeling hurricane routing. We try to put a bit more accuracy behind it. We're looking at earthquake shake maps as well. It has your area being impacted by an earthquake, and I'm going to talk much more about earthquakes when we deal with the research topics. And finally, providing directions, making sure that those directions that we give you if you're using Google Maps are aware of crises. So we'll use hurricane evacuation routes if they're available, or not route you through areas that are going to be impacted by fires, for example. Public alerts are slightly different to the SOS alerts. The SOS alerts, as I said, are very much bringing together all that information that might exist on the internet. Public alerts are much more specific. They are taking CAP fields, so Common Alerting Protocol feeds from government agencies, and making sure that they are published using those same mechanisms and get in front of people that are in areas that are impacted. So this is taking only authoritative sources, government feeds, and making sure that they're presented in that SOS alert mechanism. If you want to find out a little bit more about that, if you go to our developers site, you can see the URL at the bottom of the screen there. It shows you how we consume the CAP format feeds. And if you're not currently publishing CAP feeds, we really do suggest that you look into doing that, because it's a great way of making sure the information you want to publish as an authority is presented to people in a way that is most valuable. Okay. What I really want to concentrate on are these research topics. And these research topics cover two main types of crises. The first is about flooding. And from a flooding point of view, what we're looking at trying to solve is as a fundamental issue of hydrology. I'm actually standing here today because when I was a teenager, I got really interested in hydrological modeling as a geographer. I used to jump in and out of streams and with a flow meter and a very simple computer model of river channels. And actually the technology of how we model flooding events hasn't changed enormously in the 40 years that I've kind of, I guess, been doing this. It's largely based on sampling a river network, the hydrology of that river network at a number of sampling points, measuring the flow at those points, and then modeling what the whole channel, the whole floodplain and the hydrographic system will do after a particular event. So it's a bit like weather forecasting. If you imagine you have a number of weather stations in a country and you estimate what the weather's going to be across the whole country based on those few weather stations. What we've looked at doing is saying, well, how can we improve the density, the quality of our flood modeling by taking a slightly different approach? So what we've done is we've applied machine learning to the modeling of hydrological systems, taking terrain models that come from satellite imagery, but extracting much of the complexity of those terrain models to come up with a holistic view of the whole environment. And it allows us to increase the resolution by using machine learning to improve the modeling of the whole catchment. So it's in effect, if you imagine, I suppose, modeling flood measurement location on every point on the hydrographic network. So every point of the river, we can measure what the impact will be at a particular location after a period of time. So we measure it as a system-wide process. And we can do that. We've been experimenting doing that in Bangladesh. We've had very successful results in terms of the measurements we've made. And again, we've looked at how do we make sure that information then gets into the hands of the citizens by using public alerts to identify how much flooding is going to occur. The final topic I wanted to mention is about earthquakes. And earthquakes and the warning of earthquakes is fundamentally a race. It is a race between the speed of the earthquake itself, the ground shaking, and earthquakes travel at the speed of sound, and information. Can we get information to people that are going to be impacted by an earthquake before they are impacted by the earthquake? And the great benefit we have is that information travels at the speed of light. So earthquakes travel at the speed of sound, information travels at the speed of light. How can we make the most of that difference? Well, there are two challenges, aren't there? One is identifying where an earthquake is happening, and the other is then telling people that the earthquake is happening. If you're in an area that is impacted by earthquakes quite frequently, you may already have a big system, a sophisticated system of seismometers and of systems that will identify an earthquake has happened and communicate that. So if you're in Japan, for example, you're very fortunate. In California, you may well have those systems in place. In many other parts of the world, they don't exist. But what you do have are these. Your smartphone has very, very sensitive accelerometers on it. So in the latest versions of Android, running in the background, as your phone is sitting on your desk being charged, we're running a process that is measuring how much vibration is happening to the phone. So we can sense, using those phones, when an earthquake occurs. And we've done a lot of work to identify what an earthquake feels like, so we're not confused by thunderstorms or heavy lorries driving past. We can quite accurately identify an earthquake. We can then use that phone to then communicate to you an earthquake is going to be likely to be impacting in your particular area. Now, we launched this process initially. I'm not sure this video is going to play. Maybe it will. Here we go. Let's try. We launched this initially in California, and if the video does play, maybe it doesn't, you can see the earthquake occur, and then the message go out from that earthquake. On your mobile device, this is what you will see. There will be a very loud alarm that says there's an earthquake approaching, get under your table, take cover, and hopefully we can give you, a minute or so's pre-advance that the earthquake is coming. And it's doing this from this crowdsourcing approach of using people's mobile devices to gather that information and then communicate that information as quickly as possible. So this is rolling out initially in the West Coast of America and in some East Asian countries, but we will aim to roll this out globally over the next year or so. Finally, Philanthropy. This is making resources available to those people who are investigating crisis response, funding of volunteers, looking at connectivity solutions, refugee aid programs. If you're interested in this, in terms of funding, or any of the other projects I've mentioned, please visit our crisis response website. It's crisisresponse.google/partnerships. And of course, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Come find me over a coffee. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ed. I mean, there was so much in there. And despite us all having stuck rigorously to our timings, I don't know how we've run out of time. But are there anyone got any very quick questions before I go into the... Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I'm sorry, all the way through I've been promising we're going to have a lovely discussion at the end, and I don't quite know what's happened to the timings. But there's just a few more housekeeping remarks. The transition to the next sessions will start at 10:05, which I believe we're very close to. This room is cybersecurity. Track 1 room is non-emergency numbers, and then there's an industry warning, an industry session on public warning solutions running in track 3 room. I'd just really like to thank all of our speakers today. It's been an absolutely fascinating session, and I think we should have had more time, frankly, because then we could have had a really good chat. But thank you once again. Really appreciate it.